Morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to today's webinar from Enterprise IoT Insights. Our topic today is LPWA connectivity in IoT. Who is winning what? And this webinar is built as a matchup between LoRaWAN and Sigfox in the blue corner and NB-IoT and LTE-M in the red as cellular and non-cellular technologies. My name is James Blackman. I am editor of Enterprise IoT Insights. I'll be chairing today's session. Just a word on this matchup, this kind of boxing analogy, which we've used in the cover slide you've just seen, and in the editorial report that's going out after this session. You'll notice we are, in fact, one down. Huawei, which is sponsoring this session and was to present the cellular side of things, has not been able to make it, unfortunately. However, nonetheless, we have a fantastic panel, and in terms of balance, we should be able to put together that cellular story for you. We have ABI Research with us, who will bring that perspective, if you like, and will make clear how cellular is doing in the market. I will also bring NB-IoT and LTE-M into the discussion as well, and present their case in my questions later. And all of you can do the same. We do have a quick Q&A session, so hold on for that. So this kind of remains a contest, as it were, albeit a friendly one, and NB-IoT and LTE-M remain very much a part of it. But let me introduce the panel. We have with us today Adarsh Krishnan, who is Principal Analyst at ABI Research. Adarsh handles research into the Internet of Everything, no less. He focuses on the value chain and provides content on smart buildings, smart grids, and LPWA. We also have with us Ajay Rane, who is Vice President for Global Business Development at Sigfox, based out of San Francisco. AJ is responsible for global sales initiatives. And finally, we have Donna Moore, who is Chief Executive and Chair at the LoRa Alliance, the industry association for the global LoRaWAN market. Donna is in charge of strategy and direction as the Alliance looks to drive adoption. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Just a quick look at the format and the agenda today. Each of our panelists will present on the state of the LPWA market and how these various technologies apply and play in this IoT space. And then we will go to a Q&A session. I think we're down for 45 minutes. We can extend a little bit. So we should have plenty of time for questions, and I anticipate and hope you will get involved, because I know this is a vibrant part of the market. I should mention now, and I'll mention again later, that there is a Q&A dialog box on your screen. So if you have questions as we go, then please write them down, and we will get to them after the presentations. Also, just as a piece of housekeeping, this session is being recorded and will be available along with the slide deck to download after the session. Right. Before anything else, I'm just going to say a few quick words on Enterprise IoT Insights, which is bringing you this session today in conjunction with Huawei. In case you don't know, Enterprise IoT Insights is a premier news source for enterprise decision makers. It was launched by RCR Wireless in 2016. And the target audience is executives and volume buyers at enterprise class organizations. You can find us online, the URL and Twitter handles on your screen. Mine is too, so you can get in touch. Our speakers are on LinkedIn and elsewhere, so they shouldn't be hard to find either. And just again, as mentioned, there is a new editorial report out, which goes with this session on the same subject. And it is kind of my attempt, I guess, to bring some order to things and judge a winner perhaps in this bout. Anyway, seek it out, please. It'll be available in an hour or so. And if you don't get a mail about it, then just add /channels/reports to the homepage URL as you see at the bottom of your screen there. Okay, that's me. A reminder again, this session is being recorded, and of the Q&A afterwards in about 20 minutes or so. So write your questions as you go, and we'll look out for them. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Adarsh Krishnan from ABI. Adarsh has just produced, if you haven't seen it, a really great set of forecasts on this market, which make for really good reading and kind of provide a central narrative, if you like, for the report we've got out today. Anyway, Adarsh, thanks for being here. Over to you.
Thanks, James, and thanks to everyone joining this webinar. As James mentioned, my name is Adarsh Krishnan. I'm a principal analyst at ABI Research. And for those attending who are not aware of ABI Research, ABI Research is a 30-year-old company that provides strategic guidance for visionaries needing market foresight on the most compelling transformative technologies. At ABI, we have three major research groups, namely strategic technologies, enabling platforms, and vertical markets. I work in the enabling platforms team, where even there, my focus is on M2M, IoT, and IoE. We also have digital security and the blockchain and distributed ledger, which are the other key areas of focus. The LPWA market I've been covering for the last, say, about 7 years, even before these technologies were called LPWA, while I was covering the smart metering market. Since 2014, I've been focused a little bit more on covering the LPWA market and the technologies, which is when I published my first report. And today, I will actually take you through some of the top-level findings from the fifth iteration of the LPWA market data report, which was published in May 2019. Next slide, please. So the first slide here, before we look at the technology market share, I'd like to take you through the current state of the public network LPWA deployments. Why public LPWA networks? Because that's been like an area that has witnessed like most interest recently, and we expect to see most growth coming from the public networks as well. So the early deployment started in Europe. Sigfox was an early pioneer when it came to public networks. They first launched a network in France. Since then, we've seen a significant amount of activity starting from Europe and also growing in regions like North America, Asia Pacific, and then eventually in Middle East and Africa and Latin America as well. As you can see, cellular networks have the largest number of networks being deployed. We have about 126 networks being deployed in 53 countries. Similarly, we have LoRaWAN being deployed in 113, deploying 113 networks in 55 countries, while Sigfox has about 60 networks being deployed in 60 countries. And these are all at various stages of commercial deployment. It's also worth noting, while looking at these different network technologies, say both cellular and LoRaWAN, you have multiple networks being deployed in each region. For example, in the US alone, if you look at the cellular LPWA deployments, you have T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T all now supporting NB-IoT, with Verizon and AT&T also supporting LTE-M. We also have Dish Network deploying an NB-IoT network. So we're looking at about 6 networks coming from the US alone. So in comparison, when you see Sigfox, it's actually 1 network per region, per country. So which is why you have 60 networks in 60 countries. Now, just briefly looking at the device ecosystem. So again, some interesting facets come out, like when you look at the cellular LPWA end devices, and this is mostly coming from the data that we got from the Global Mobile Supplier Association GSA report, which was published in April 2019. An interesting thing is like about 94% of the end devices, not taking into consideration modules, gateways, and other infrastructure, just the end devices. About 94% of them actually are asset trackers. Some wearables and condition-based monitoring devices take the rest. While if you look at maybe LoRaWAN or Sigfox, and they've had a certain lead when compared to cellular, you'll see a large number of the end devices that are currently available in the market are, say, environmental sensors, both for indoor and outdoor, largely targeting a lot of the smart city applications, followed by condition-based monitoring devices, and then asset trackers and smart meters, for example. This kind of gives you a view in terms of the end device ecosystem and the maturity of the end devices, at least for both cellular and non-cellular. Again, another thing to note here is does not include devices where, for example, like in smart metering, you have already devices or projects that actually use NB-IoT and LTE-M for smart meters, but then they're not really off the shelf. They are mostly like, say, devices or meters from a Itron or a Honeywell, which actually use a module from a module vendor and then being implemented. We're yet to see a portfolio of devices that are actually like, say, readily available from the meter vendors, for example, that you can actually implement. So that's something to note as well. The next slide, please. This is where we go into a lot more detail. We provide a little bit more detail analysis around the regional breakout for LPWAN technologies. And as you can see, I've grouped the regions in APAC, Europe, Americas, and India. In the report, it's about 6 regions, including Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and in the Americas, we have North America and Latin America. At least from our analysis around like for 2018, what we see is about Asia Pacific in 2018 contributed to the largest number of LPWAN connections, accounting for nearly about 40% of all connections in the world. And this is closely followed by the Americas and Europe with about 26% and 25% of LPWAN connections respectively. So this includes both private network deployments and public network. And just to give a little bit more detail, in 2018, if you look at the connectivity technologies, the other proprietary LPWAN technologies, non-cellular LPWA technologies had a leading share of connections in 2018, closely followed by LoRa and then NB-IoT in that order. LoRa and NB-IoT in 2018 made substantial gains compared to all the other technologies from their early growth or traction in the APAC region, and specifically in China. It's noteworthy that much of the non-cellular LPWAN connection growth, even in China for that matter, came from private networks that were being built by, say, for example, utilities in their smart metering deployments or smart city and other industrial IoT applications. But what we're starting to see is there's significant growth coming from the public networks, especially both like say NB-IoT and LoRaWAN public networks as they become commercially available. We also see this growth coming from, say, other more developed sort of East Asian countries like South Korea, Japan, and also from India, for example, with LoRaWAN, where LoRaWAN has one of the largest public networks being deployed by Tata Communications and also by Senra, another new entrant in that market. Now, if you look at Europe, Europe is like, say, the most diverse and the most interesting market, primarily because it is like the early battleground for a lot of these LPWAN technologies, triggered by Sigfox and their early public LPWA network starting in France, and then also their expansion to other countries. So this also actually provided the fodder almost like, say, for LoRaWAN with the formation of LoRa Alliance, where we saw rapid growth with network operators like say, Orange or KPN, Swisscom, Proximus, who subsequently like, say, launched their own public LoRaWAN networks to compete in the market. Eventually, we saw cellular LPWA technologies also also like say being deployed by the likes of DT and Deutsche Telekom and Vodafone. But in Europe, we still see the most fiercely competing technology still to be Sigfox and LoRa, and among LPWA technologies, NB-IoT is obviously catching up to the competition. In 2018, we still see Sigfox, at least in the European market, slightly taking the lead over LoRa. NB-IoT, we see that starting to see growth in, say, around 2021. The delay partly because network operators are still in that early process of actually, I wouldn't say early, but then still deploying their networks, starting from cities to providing more region-wide network coverage, and the network, and also the device ecosystem is slowly starting to catch up to the likes of LoRa and Sigfox. So what we expect to see is substantial growth in the device ecosystem for NB-IoT, starting from the second half of 2020, when we see module providers coming out with the Qualcomm 9205 chipset, the dual mode solutions in the market. We also start seeing more ISIM-based solutions coming out by the first half of 2020. That will start driving a lot of the growth in terms of devices as well in the end markets. Looking at the Americas, I think North America has a significant portion of, or will contribute a significant portions of the connections, more specifically, like say the US. And the US is a key growth area, and it always has been an important market for LPWAN. And traditionally, it has been catered to by the more proprietary private LPWAN solutions. For example, you've seen the smart meter OEMs like say Census with their FlexNet solution. Clara is another good example. We've also seen SVR solutions, stolen vehicle recovery solutions from the LoJacks, which actually use a proprietary LPWAN as well. And they have always been dominating that market, at least when it comes to these proprietary solutions. What we're starting to see now is with the telcos deployment of LTE-M, NB-IoT, seeing that sort of shift to more public network infrastructure. Cellular is specifically will still see a big, will take a big chunk of that market in the North American market. LTE-M has a bit more mature ecosystem compared to NB-IoT, although we've seen a number of telcos now support both LTE-M and NB-IoT. We still see the LTE-M as a little bit more mature, and it'll still have the largest share of the IoT connections going forward. LoRa is an interesting technology to watch as well, especially because of and it's going to be the biggest challenger in the US market, especially as we see a lot of the cable MSOs like the Cox, Comcast, back LoRaWAN deployments in the US. We've also seen Senet build large city-wise networks. So at least in the North American market, we still see LoRa as the biggest challenger, and NB-IoT and LTE-M taking a big share of the market. Finally, Middle East and Africa, and if you had seen the earlier chart, you'll see there's still been relatively less activity in the Middle East and Africa, at least from a network development perspective or deployment perspective. But we still see some early traction in that space, especially in the Gulf regions where the oil and gas rich regions are starting to see digitization of their industry. So we're starting to see some condition-based monitoring applications, asset tracking applications in that region. Also in South Africa, in the African region, are starting to see some growth in smart city applications and also some aftermarket telematics use cases. It's still a very fragmented market at the moment, that region. Non-cellular LPWA, we expect will still lead, at least from an LPWA perspective. Non-cellular technologies will take a lead in that market at the moment, in that region. So in conclusion, what we're seeing still is a very fragmented LPWA technology market with, at least in 2018, OEM-based sort of proprietary technologies that have been verticalized to address specific IoT use cases are still dominating at the moment. However, in the short term, we would look at about a 3 to 4 year period. Non-cellular LPWA network technologies have a relative advantage compared to cellular, with a growing number of device vendors and IoT solutions that are early or are available already in the market. But we expect to see the connections from cellular technologies starting to ramp up from 2021, catching up with, like, say, non-cellular technologies by 2023, 2024. And as the market matures, we see most of these, like, say, the market consolidating among like the 4 major technologies. We see the market share slipping from the other proprietary solutions and consolidating towards, like, say, Sigfox, LoRa, NB-IoT, and LTE-M. NB-IoT will have the majority will have the most number of connections by end of 2026, mostly because of the growth that's coming from the APAC region in China, especially. A lot of the government-aided or funded programs are already starting to see devices being connected. I think those connections will start coming up as well. However, we still believe each technology will have its own, they all have their own strengths and weaknesses, and will continue to play a crucial part to address the various IoT applications that come in the future. So that's the end of my presentation, James, and thank everyone for joining the webinar. And if you have any questions, I look forward to answering them at the end of all the presentations. Thank you.
Adarsh, thank you very much. That's really fantastic. There's a lot of information in there, and I think there's a lot for us to process, really. I just curiously looking at those graphs, I was going to ask why NB-IoT is kind of, in your opinion, so skewed towards Asia Pacific, and also asset tracking. It seems like you had one slide which said, I think, 90-odd%, and then here you have a slide which says by 2026. I mean, it's all going on in Asia Pacific, at least for NB-IoT. But actually, there's a skew on LoRa and Sigfox as well, insofar as, well, perhaps not LoRa. LoRa looks like a kind of fairly even distribution, but Sigfox is dominating in Europe, at least compared with LoRa, and then LTE-M is really taking a lot of share, more than twice anybody else in the US. Just could you explain a little bit more about the NB-IoT in China, why that's working so well there and not in other markets, why Sigfox is working so well in Europe and less relative to other markets, and why I guess LTE-M is working so well in the Americas?
Of course. So and I think, like, say, the APAC region, and even in the APAC region, we need to look specifically into the Chinese market. And I think China has been the strongest proponent of NB-IoT since the beginning. We've seen the Chinese government backing NB-IoT among many of their IoT projects. So what we've seen is both the government incentives and that push from the telcos in China alone has seen much wider adoption of NB-IoT much earlier than some of the other regions, driving a lot of the growth that we expect to see going forward. At the moment, it's still a lot, in terms of what we expected to see, at least for NB-IoT numbers, at least from China, have been a little less than what we expected. But we still see a lot of the OEMs starting to embed NB-IoT already in their end devices. Now, we will see how they're actually being used and when they'll get connected. But in terms of the embedding of NB-IoT in end devices, that's already starting to take place at a much larger scale. So you already see, from a module perspective, large number of NB-IoT modules being shipped from the module vendors. So in APAC, I think that's one of the biggest drivers. I think China, just as a single market, is making this massive shift or pushing the growth for NB-IoT for the whole region. We also see some of the other regions, like other countries within the region, also starting to see early adoption of NB-IoT. Maybe a little bit in South Korea, in Japan, and also in India. Hopefully, like, say, sometime this year, we're seeing, like, say, early moves towards, like, say, developing IoT solutions, NB-IoT solutions. So that's the main reason why we're seeing NB-IoT growth going forward. Europe, I think Europe was an interesting point because we already had seen a number of network operators launching NB-IoT solutions. But we've still, there have been some issues from a network infrastructure perspective. There have been issues, like, say, from a hardware device perspective. And those challenges are still being addressed at the moment. And I think to a large extent, they've already been addressed in the beginning of 2019. And I think what we're seeing now is, like, the growth in terms of the device ecosystem coming into play, and then offering these IoT solutions to the end customers. That is where that small delay is what is actually being reflected in our forecast as well.
Just very quickly, because we've got a Q&A at the end, but just very quickly, just comment on that showing for I guess for Sigfox in Europe, which is where its stronghold is.
Right.
Have a continued stronghold there. You know, just explain away that if you can, and a little bit. So just say something a little bit on the LTE-M showing in the US.
Of course, I'll quickly say about Sigfox. Sigfox it has been an early proponent both from a LPWA perspective and from a public networks perspective. And from the public networks, we've already seen their big move has been, like, say, in this home security applications, like, say, with Securitas Direct, and we see that continuing to grow both in Spain and in the rest of Europe. While that is one piece, we see some smart city applications as well. Asset tracking is, like, say, their biggest application going forward, and we expect to see big numbers coming from there. We've seen some early traction already with DHL, Group PSA, Total, and the others implementing such solutions. Those were still in smaller hundreds of thousands, and I think we're in early stages where we expect to see that ramp up to maybe in the millions when we start seeing the package level tracking applications take off. So that is why we expect Sigfox to continue to have a larger share of the non-cellular LPWA market, at least in Europe. LTE-M is an interesting piece because LTE-M has been, networks have been available in the North American market for a little over 18 months. And what we're seeing is a number of those projects that were being tested, like, say, in POCs, are now starting to see a larger rollouts are starting to take place. A lot of it was actually also based on the 2G sunset, and LTE-M is actually is being, like, a lot of the 2G and 3G connections are actually being transitioned to LTE-M as well. So in the North American market, we still see LTE-M continue to grow, and the new application that will still drive the growth will be from the asset tracking, aftermarket telematics, or the telematics applications. That's where we see LTE-M continue to grow, at least in the North American market.
Okay, look, fantastic. It's really, really great information there. Dash, thank you so much. We will take the time we need to get through this, just so everybody knows. But look, let's move on. I'd like to introduce Ajay Rane, who is the Vice President of Global Business Development at Sigfox. I think Ajay is going to talk a whole lot about tracking, perhaps, and also about Sigfox's 0G concept, which I think is really interesting. And I'd say really Sigfox's strategy in general is something which perhaps gets less airtime and is very interesting in itself. So AJ, I'm delighted you could join us. Thank you, and over to you.
Well, thank you, James, and thank you everyone for joining the webinar today. My name is Ajay Rane, and I'm VP of Global Business Development with Sigfox. So today I'm going to talk about Sigfox and just to give you a brief primer on why we launched the network in 2010. The fundamental belief that we have is we need to connect any object from anywhere in the world, and that is what Sigfox is all about. And that's where, so next slide, please. And that's why we are building the world's largest 0G network. And there are two focus areas for us. One is the traditional IoT as we all know it, and the second area of focus for us is backup for broadband. So let me explain a little bit about backup for broadband, because it's not what you may think. We're not looking at a failover solution, but is a secondary connectivity, and which enables the broadband networks to be able to retrieve messages and error codes when the primary network is down. So in the case of traditional IoT, Sigfox is the primary network, versus in the case of backup for broadband, we are providing secondary services where the primary network could be LTE, could be cellular, or could be fiber or other connectivity for broadband. And we've had tremendous success in both the IoT space as well as the backup for broadband, and primarily because of our cost efficiencies, both from a device perspective as well as from the subscription cost perspective. And low power, of course, is another aspect of our network, where we are the lowest power network available for IoT and lowest power devices, because we have very deterministic power consumption, unlike any other technology in the world. Global network, that's another unique Sigfox element where we are one network. So as you saw in the slides from others, there are multiple networks for cellular or even for or even for LoRaWAN, but they may or may not be connected. In most cases, they're not. Versus Sigfox, that is not the case. We have per country exclusivity, and it's one network across the globe. Next slide, please. So if you look at our 0G network, and this is very, very fundamental to what we do, we believe that the IoT industry needs something that is very low cost, from a device perspective, something that has a global footprint and has a single cloud. So if you contrast that with the other Gs, right, the 2G all the way through 5G technologies, this sort of shows you a comparison of where Sigfox is from three different perspectives. From a module perspective, we have the lowest cost modules, and that leads to low cost devices. The second one is very interesting, is because of our technology and how simple it is, we require fewer base stations. And what that means is the CapEx investment that is required for Sigfox network operators is significantly lower compared to cellular. In addition, we are in the unlicensed spectrum band. So we haven't paid billions of dollars for buying the spectrum. And that again comes into the CapEx requirements. And if you have a large CapEx, you're going to be expecting large ARPUs, which is where we differentiate ourselves, is because of our lower cost of production, because of our lower cost of infrastructure, we are able to offer IoT at an incredibly affordable price. And then the last point is again about a global network, a single global cloud, which on the surface might not be evident to people, that if you have a global solution, in many cases with cellular, you may or may not be able to extract data and even manage your SIM cards from a single cloud. Versus with Sigfox, all that is done through a single cloud. All your data resides in the single cloud, and you're able to manage any device anywhere in the world using a single platform. The next slide, please. So this slide talks about where we are today. We are in 60 countries, and as the previous presenter Adarsh mentioned, because we have per country exclusivity, you're not going to see multiple networks in each country. And that is another value proposition that we have, is because of how we are set up, and because of how the network operates, and the uniqueness of providing a single cloud. It's a huge advantage both for our operators as well as for our customers, where they can take advantage of our low cost, low power, and global availability, as well as the simplicity of the network, because we are infrastructureless. We do not expect any of our customers to set up their own gateways or such. So in that sense, we're more closer to cellular networks, where we implement the network, and that's not a concern for any of our customers. So Sigfox today covers over 1 billion people, and we have over 5 million square kilometers in terms of coverage globally. Next slide, please. And so just a reminder from just for the audience, that Sigfox is at the heart of the IoT ecosystem. We are the connectivity provider. We do not manufacture the chips, and modules. They come from third-party vendors, because we have an open protocol. Our spec has been made public, and people can download it and implement Sigfox on any device, on any chip maker. So that's why we have the world's largest chip makers. So it's a multi-vendor ecosystem for Sigfox, where all the world's largest chip makers are offering Sigfox-based products, and you can get modules from various module vendors. And the same thing from a device maker perspective. There are no royalties for Sigfox, neither for the technology nor for accessing the technology. There is no charge, and there is no charge for ongoing per device royalties as well. And on the right-hand side, that's where all this data is pulled from our cloud, and platform providers are able to access the data from our cloud using a free API, and they're able to monetize on that, and then obviously transfer that over to vertical applications. So this is what the Sigfox ecosystem looks like, where we are enabling the entire industry. We're not just taking control of every single aspect of it. And that is the beauty of the Sigfox 0G network. Next slide, please. So there are, our focus, as I mentioned earlier, is to fuel massive IoT deployments around the world. And we've looked at what are the barriers, and here I'm listing a few. One of them is having a global and reliable network. So one contract, one network. Doesn't matter where you are, it needs to be just one single entity that needs to provide, and just to simplify things, so that way you're not dealing with roaming charges and other things where network or you may not have the right credentials because of agreements not being executed between carriers and such. So that's one. And the other thing which you need to look at is also interference, resistance to interference and jamming. Sigfox, because of our ultra narrowband technology, our signal is only 600 hertz in the US and 100 hertz, and in the rest of the world, and that's a huge reason for how we are resistant to interference and jamming, unlike cellular, which can be jammed, or other technologies with spread spectrum. You can easily jam the signal. Sigfox is significantly resistant to jamming. I talked about simplicity. Again, there's no protocol. It's one of the most efficient links between the objects and the internet. Overall, the lowest TCO, total cost of ownership. And again, the reason being, it starts with the device, right? It starts with the chipsets being significantly cheaper, and then modules are cheaper, and hence devices. And also from our perspective, because of our extremely low CapEx requirements, our operators are able to offer significantly lower subscription costs, which is very, very important for massive IoT. Because if we keep the same pricing as we have done with previous technologies, you're going to get the same results. The adoption is not going to happen. So that's why it is extremely critical to look at the CapEx and the OpEx for the operators themselves, because then that will set the ARPU expectations. And low energy, as I mentioned earlier, most of our devices are in sleep mode most of the time, and they're asynchronous. And that's why we're able to offer the lowest power consumption in the industry. In fact, our power consumption is deterministic, which is unlike any other technology, because we do not have the handshake requirements that many other technologies have. We do not have power control from the network side, which can increase or decrease the power of the devices. In our case, the devices are completely independent, and we can say specifically how much energy is consumed for each message. Next slide, please. Now, looking at some more data, and more specifically into various industries, we talked about the types of barriers. There's technology barriers, and then there's business barriers, and I covered most of them. But this is a brief listing of what are the things that we're seeing and how we're overcoming them with the Sigfox 0G network, both from the technology perspective. People are these are some of the barriers that customers are looking to overcome, especially the battery life. The no pairing part of it, again, is very significant. Anti-jamming is a huge advantage on the Sigfox network. And no complexity from a roaming and a global availability perspective. And the business side of things, again, we talked about the TCO, the low cost of the devices, and the low ARPU expectations because of how the businesses are set up. And as a result of this, if you look at where we are winning, obviously we are I've highlighted some of the key verticals where we're seeing significant growth, and I've also highlighted some verticals where other technologies are winning. And the Sigfox is not the answer to all your IoT needs. We believe in a multi-vendor, multi-technology ecosystem. Ultimately, we need to do what is right for our customers. So I'm not going to walk you through every single line item on this chart, but I just wanted to put it out there to show the participants, that the attendees, that IoT is a collaborative business, and we believe that ultimately the right technology for the right customer is going to win. So next slide, please. And to that end, we also believe in collaborating with our so-called competitors. And in this case, this is a perfect example of GCT Semiconductor launching the world's first hybrid device. So it's a single chip solution that supports CAD-M and NB-IoT and Sigfox. And so they were able to implement Sigfox on their existing LTE, NB-IoT, and CAD-M chip without adding any gates, without spinning the chip. It was just a software upgrade. So it is that simple. And this is a unique example of where we believe that complementary technologies have a place in the market, and we're winning several designs with this, where in this case, just to be specific, for asset tracking applications, you don't need to be tracking them all the time. And sometimes you need to use cellular, but most of the time these are on Sigfox. So that way you get the best of both worlds. And that's a unique example of how Sigfox is collaborating with other technologies. And we believe that we are complementary to the cellular business as well. Next slide, please. And so in summary, we are paving the path for massive IoT adoption and winning big, right? And whether it's in the asset tracking space, whether it's in the utilities, which are the traditional IoT solutions. But not only that, we're also seeing massive adoption happening in the backup for broadband applications. And so this is where Sigfox is winning. So thank you, everyone. And I'll take questions at the end.
Thank you, Ajay. We've got a bunch of questions come in. Really, really fascinating stuff. It's we are up on our 45. We will take the time we need. Donna, the floor is yours, and we'll come to questions after Donna's presentation. Now, I'll just introduce Donna Moore is Chief Executive and Chair of the LoRa Alliance, and I think that she will really showcase the vibrancy of the LoRa community which she represents. Donna, let me hand over to you.
Great, thank you. All right, before I kick off, I just make sure. Can you hear me? Okay.
Sure can, yeah.
Okay, great. So I just want to kick off by saying that LoRaWAN, we're talking a lot about technology here, and I understand that, but we have moved from talking about technology specifics, which I do cover our differentiators, into really talking about deployments. So when we're talking to our customers about deployments and solutions, we've moved way past the specifics of technology because of our massive implementations and the fact that it's just working. So let me go through my deck and show that, really the best predictors of future success, which we're all talking about who's going to win, are specific examples today of the successes. So let me show you a little bit about, where we are. Thank you for moving. So LoRaWAN over the last year has grown 60% in 2018. And just to clarify some of the numbers that were presented earlier, we have over 100 LoRaWAN network operators, and many of those operators are implementing both NB-IoT and LoRaWAN. And we're in over 140 countries and growing very rapidly. You can go to the next slide. So what I want to say on this is that what is super important for LoRaWAN is that we have the most extensive IoT member organization and members contributing to the LoRa Alliance. And if you look at this, the key about this is the fully integration. We have members representing us around the globe, from chipsets to modules, devices, gateways, servers, operators, system integrators, and it takes this entire ecosystem to move the LPWAN forward. And as importantly, which is very interesting, we have the largest developer ecosystem. And how we're seeing this play out is that all of these members that you see that are implementing today and scaling today LoRaWAN implementations, we also have right behind that a developer ecosystem that are daily cranking out new use cases, new ideas, new ways to use LoRaWAN. So when you look at the developer and you look at the implementers, the growth is enormous, and the drive of what's happening is huge. And I will point out one thing, the mass members that we have, and again, it's not just about the deployments and the mass deployments that we have all over the globe, it's about the number of companies that are deploying. You know, I think there was a question earlier about Sigfox and why it was so strong in Europe, and I believe what I understand is that 45% of Sigfox's connections come from one single company, which is Securitas. And the difference between having half of your connections come from one company and having all of our connections come from literally thousands of companies all over the globe, and as soon as they implement, you know, one network and device, they're adding and adding and adding more devices to that network, is why our growth is like a bullet train and taking off. And it's why we've moved to, you know, again, supporting solutions versus talking about just the technology. You can move forward. So we are marketing, primarily our marketing team is marketing and supporting 6 verticals: smart cities, building automation, industrial IoT, utilities, agriculture, and asset tracking. And we today, I have to keep saying that because when we talk about NB-IoT, it's all about 2026 or all about, you know, whatever. We have millions and rolling to billions of global connections today. And again, these are the areas that we have very strong implementations in, but you know, we're in we're in healthcare and, you know, casinos and many other industries as well. And I'd like to say that LoRaWAN is specifically positioned to take advantage of the mass IoT, which again is predicted around 75% of the global mass market. You know, 25% we believe will go to 5G, you know, high bandwidth, emergency services, connected car, video and entertainment. That's great. That is not our space. We are very clear that we are focusing on the low power, deep penetration space of the LPWAN market. And again, with that huge developer ecosystem, every day we're seeing new use cases rolling out, which is pushing the numbers beyond anything. Sorry for all of the analysts, but I believe that whatever the analysts predict, the numbers will be so much greater because of this incredible developer ecosystem that's pushing this and adding on to already networks that are already deployed. So this is very exciting, and I believe that the applications are really never ending. So next slide. So I just want to talk about LoRaWAN certification, and this is huge. And the reason why it's huge is that, especially for LoRaWAN, for anything, but you know, with our sensors being deployed for 10+ years, and our sensors are underground or in hard to reach places, and we have millions of sensors, again, soon to be billions, that are deployed in the market, certification is a must because we have to know, and the consumers have to know, that the devices are reliable and they'll work as intended. And again, you know, we also have firmware update over the air, making sure that those devices are reliable and can be future-proofed. And just an example of our certification programs, because different groups can say they have certification, but what are they truly testing? And that is important. And LoRaWAN just launched a pre-certification, or LoRa Alliance just launched a pre-certification test tool for all of our members. So in their facilities, they can test their certifications in their facility, making sure that the devices work. And this test tool is a member benefit. So we test, and then once they test and they know everything is working at their facility, they'll take it to a test house, and they test for conformance against the specification. They test for interoperability with the networks, and they test for RF testing. So network operators no longer need to perform all those additional tests to make sure that it'll be on the network and work as expected. And this is huge. This is huge for confidence for integrators and customers, knowing that it's going to meet the needs that were sold to them to begin with. All right, next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about the differentiators and benefits of LoRaWAN. And I believe these are the differentiators really almost against any technology out there. And one is that LoRaWAN has both public networks and private network deployments. And in addition to that, we can do, or all of our members can do CapEx or service models. So it depends on the customer need and how they want to set up their program. So the flexibility in terms of business model and setup is a huge differentiator for LoRaWAN. And the fact that we have so many vendors producing modules and networks and applications to view, they can pick and choose and price out the best service for them or the best type of product. LoRaWAN launched firmware update over the air. Again, exceedingly important when you've got millions and billions of sensors out in the market. You need to be able to communicate and update as needed. With no additional cost, LoRaWAN has geolocation embedded in all of our devices. We have bidirectional security, a 10-plus-year battery life, and I will say we've done a lot of testing, and it is documented and concluded that the battery life for LoRaWAN is significantly better than NB-IoT. If anyone wants any information on that, we'll be happy to share those reports. And probably as or more important is the coverage. So with LoRaWAN, our coverage is not just in cities where we can easily densify and add new gateways. It's also in rural areas where there is no cellular coverage. It's over oceans where we've got now, there's LoRaWAN gateway satellites launched. And so the point is, it is everywhere. It's not just where cellular is, it is literally covering the globe. Over water, everywhere can be reached with the LoRaWAN network. And as importantly is the deep penetration. LoRaWAN is the only technology out there that has significant deep penetration through concrete, through steel, through ground, and we're seeing it. That's why consumers are already selecting and deploying LoRaWAN, because it works. It's cost effective, it's easy to install, they have so many vendors to pick from, there's flexibility in network flexibilities and service models, and it just does what they need it to do. So these are what we feel are the significant differentiators and why we're driving forward. Next slide. So this is just, again, to say that today, not if or in the future, today LoRaWAN deployments are massive, they're scaling, they're implemented by thousands of companies worldwide. Next slide. So I just wanted to give some examples. Again, if you get on Google Alerts and you type in LoRaWAN or LoRa Alliance, you will get numerous press releases daily by all the deployments happening around the world. And if you can see, you've got Birds in Orange with 3 million connections. We've got Senate in over 80 countries. We've got American Tower in Brazil that's got over 2 million connections. We've got Comcast that's in 13 cities, as well as just announcing that they are in Universal Parks. And what they told me is they've deployed the network in the Universal parks, and then they just keep adding new use cases. So it's exploding within itself, and it's doing so well that they're rolling out to all the other parks. And if you can see, Australia has the biggest LoRaWAN network with NN&Co. Senra, as talked about earlier, and Tata have over 30 cities in India. I mean, the list goes on and on. These are just some I pulled up to give very specific examples of the mass deployments today and why we're just talking about moving forward. And the other thing is, we've got lists and lists of actual ROI. These companies are talking about returns on investments. Costco is another one, and they're saying that, we saved 22% of this with LoRaWAN. We have numerous customers that are getting immediate ROI with LoRaWAN. So we can move to my last slide. So I want to say this. LoRaWAN is the de facto standard. It's been identified through various investor groups. EE Times says LoRaWAN and NB-IoT are the race at the end. We've got EE News Europe. We've got IHS Markit. They're all saying, and this is, again, just an example of the statements from the market coming back to us saying LoRaWAN is the de facto standard. And I appreciate Ardash's feedback from his study, but there are other studies out there. IHS is a great one that just got released that's showing LoRaWAN, 50-50 in 2023 with NB-IoT. So, everyone looks at their different researches, and I assume that they talk to different companies, and they do get some different results. What I want to say is this. I don't care what IHS or ABI or anyone says. I believe this market is so huge that no analyst can correctly predict where it's going. And a lot of that has to do with and this is what we're already seeing with LoRaWAN. Once these large deployments go out, they just keep adding new sensors and new use cases to that network. And because of these developer ecosystems, there's so much going on that I believe the analysts aren't even picking up on, because they're different types of use cases that don't fall into the standard smart city industrial IoT. They are any and everything you can touch and even not touch out there, such as air quality, that is being measured. So I just want to leave their group with saying that it's not about if, it's not about when for LoRaWAN. We are all over the world. We're deploying. It's tons of companies. We're moving forward. So everybody else is getting caught up in where we're going to be. I think they just need to pay attention to what is right now. And it is incredible, the growth. And partly because the market is pulling. It's not LoRaWAN pushing. It's true for the other standards as well. I'm sure that they see it. But the market is pulling us. And it's just going like wildfire. And the last thing I want to leave with is that LoRaWAN is a standard, right? We're not, I know that Sigfox is a proprietary company. We're a standard. We're an open standard. And more companies are joining this standard to continue to evolve it and to implement it, and so that they can connect and work together globally. So we're really happy about this success. And as I started at the beginning, I think the best predictor to future success is current success, and LoRaWAN is all about implementations and current success today. So I think that covers everything. Thank you.
Donna, thank you very much. That was fantastic. So we are right up on the time limit. We have a number of questions coming. A lot of the questions that are coming in are kind of technical questions about Sigfox, and I might get. I just asked RJ to get on to type some answers out, because we're not going to have a chance to go through them all. I don't think we will, though. However, I understand we will be able to be in touch post the session and drop you a line with answers. I understand that is a capability. But it's interesting, these numbers, and in the end, I think there is in fact some fighting talk in there from all parties. I wonder, Adash, just very quickly, what do you make of the? I mean, a forecast is a forecast, right? It's not meant to be the definitive number, I guess. But can you talk about the numbers you hear, and I guess, in fact, before Adash, we go to Adash, perhaps Donna, just can you put a number on what you expect? Does the LoRa community say? I think ABI has you down for 600 odd million in 2026. I mean, does that it sounds like you disagree with that. I just wonder if you have an alternative number or something which you entertain.
Here's what I would say is, the numbers are fair for now, but here's what I would say. There is no one today that can predict the numbers, even in actually a ballpark, because we are growing at such a rate, and there's so much happening that, again, I don't think is in the view of everybody, that whatever they predict, it is significantly greater than what is predicted. I know that from the background chatter and what we see that we're implementing. And what I would say is, it is the most exciting, transformative space, and we're all lucky to be in it because it's going to blow the socks off. That's what I would say.
And perhaps, RJ, we can just pick up with Sigfox. I mean, like I said, there's a couple of technical questions in there about deployment models and throughput and this kind of stuff. If you get a moment, you can go on in the Q&A box. That'd be great. But RJ, just on a Sigfox point of view, you know, Sigfox has spoken to me just recently about this kind of 1 billion target it has by 2023, which is you know, I mean, the figures are crazy, right? I mean, it's more than double what ABI has you down for in a longer kind of a time period, and clearly there's a bit of guesswork going on, you know, on certain parts. It seems that Adarsh is, and I'm sure everybody has kind of put their minds to it and gone through it and come up with what they expect it to be. But Arja, how do you get to 1 billion connections? I mean, that's insane growth. And Donna's talking about insane growth, so maybe we just need to realize that's what it is. But can you just put that in context for me?
Absolutely. Great question, James. And you know, I'd like to also address some of the other things where, you know, from a forecasting perspective, I think we have been too honest to our own detriment. And let me clarify a little bit. When Sigfox reports connectivity numbers, these are actual units that we are getting subscriptions from. These are not forecasts. These are not things that we have in the pipeline or anything like that. Because even though we are privately held over the last 2 years and will continue to do that, we have been reporting our financial numbers, and they're up for scrutiny for everybody. And that is the difference between our numbers versus the rest of the market, which are just forecasts or predictions. What we are reporting is what we have.
Ajay,
now, specifically to your, I'm sorry, so just specifically to address your 1B23, right? That's what you wrote about in your last article. And I think it's the way we look at it is we will have over 100 networks in 100 countries by that time. And even if each of our operators delivers 10 million units, that's 1 billion units. And if they can't deliver 10 million, I think, you know, then you know, it would be some others that would deliver more, right? So collectively, if you average it out, it's basically 100 operators delivering 10 million connections by 2023. That's certainly doable.
Okay, and Adarsh, just a review of what you've heard here. I mean, you know, there is, you know, it seems that they're not buying your numbers. You know, I just give me a view from you know, you've trawled through this market, you've looked at the contracts coming in, you've done the counting, you've done the maths. It seems logical, but I mean, it's crazy, isn't it?
I think it's fair. I think both of the companies are being optimistic about their own technologies, and I think they should be, both of them. I think like a lot of these technologies are great technologies, and they're seeing some good traction, and they're continuing to grow. And I wish them the best. My job is to take more of an objective assessment of the market based on the past growth, look at the current ecosystem that's actually supporting some of these IoT applications, and look at the potential future applications these technologies could address. And while considering also some of the other market factors, right? Like the competition, the addressable market in some of these solutions are trying to play in. So I think like the forecasts are meant to be taken as forecasts and with a pinch of salt, but they're likely to change as the market continues to evolve. So I hope they're all correct in some way. I hope the market continues to progress and we have a much more connected and a sustainable world. And just to add, just final thing, Donald, and just to add, like say in terms of the both the connectivity technologies, Sigfox and LoRa are both closed in a way, right? Sigfox is closed from a network infrastructure perspective. They're they're open, like say from the IC chipset until the network infrastructure, and then it gets a bit closed, right? For a Sigfox perspective. And a LoRa perspective, the chipsets are closed. You have a single vendor ecosystem where Semtech is the only producer of the transceivers. So both of them are in a way closed. I think that also is a key aspect when you're looking at these two different technologies. That's
well, let me just comment back on that. So we don't. We have 5 or 6, 7 other vendors that are making the chipsets. And when you're a standard, you either pay rand for every time you use it, or you have a vendor that supplies it. It's a wish-wash either way. So Semtech is not the only supplier of the chips. But let me just say this, and I think this will help clarify some of the growth that we also are seeing. I think everyone's forgetting about the private network. So what can be measured is the public networks. What's difficult to measure is the private networks because they're private. And so not only are networks multiplying because they keep adding devices, but in addition to that, the growth of the private networks, which I don't think are in a lot of these forecasts, is what's driving the numbers dramatically as well.
I wanted, Don, just let's go away from the numbers, because I think just for everyone's information, Adarsh and I will have a session to go through numbers again in a couple of weeks, and we'll keep you posted on that. But just in terms of the private networking thing, I mean, the story has been told from the point of view, some years back, that Sigfox was coming up against the public network operators, and it now appears at least to have repositioned itself, or told a better story about its position, perhaps, that it's a complementary network. I wonder, with LoRa rolling out private networks, private LPWA networks to enterprises and this kind of stuff, is there a risk with this momentum, apparent momentum at least, around private LTE and 5G? I mean, if enterprises are looking in a serious fashion, or certain enterprises are looking in a serious fashion at private cellular, and there is the ability to run NB-IoT and LTE-M off the same infrastructure, does that threaten the LoRaWAN private networking kind of model at all, even in some fashion?
No, actually not at all, because what we've heard from customers is that they can't make a business case for NB-IoT just for one private enterprise, right? And that's usually how they come about. And so it's just more expensive, and it's very hard to be successful in doing just private networks with NB-IoT. So I don't think so. Again, between the cost and setting up, I think other networks found that if you set a network and just hope they'll come on the private side isn't how that works, right? So deploying a network just for one enterprise, it's just not cost effective. And I do think that, over time, as the public and private networks get built out, particularly what we're seeing for LoRaWAN, that there could be, crossover between the networks and use around it. But no, I don't see that as a competitor.
Okay, Donna, thank you.
On the private side, though, I think what we're seeing, and James, just quickly, is many of the private LTE networks that we're seeing are being offered by either utilities or other companies that have spectrum. And there's also the unlicensed LTE bands as well. But also on the forecast side, I think we are as an industry, we're confusing numbers, right? We're trying to compare NB-IoT with Sigfox and LoRaWAN and LoRa private networks. I think the LoRa private numbers are more suited to be compared to Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, because there's no revenue coming out of those numbers. What we're tracking as an industry for global IoT with these type of predictions should only include the LoRaWAN side rather than the private LoRa networks, which are more closer to Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. That's our position.
Okay. Look, thank you. We'll come back another time to forecast. I have a number of questions here, and we're 10 minutes over. For people who are left, what we will do is we'll go through, if we can, in a quick fire fashion, the questions we have. So if the panelists can keep their answers succinct, we'll start. Sigfox, you mentioned onboard diagnostic technologies in your slide. Can you explain just very quickly what that is?
Yeah, so we have several devices that are, for backup for broadband, where there may be onboard diagnostics that can use the Sigfox 0G network to communicate the error codes or the results of the diagnostics when the primary network is not available.
Okay, and just another one. Firmware over the air, software over the air updates on Sigfox. Is that doable?
Absolutely. So we are a two-way communications technology, and all of our devices will support two-way updates.
Okay. All right. Okay. And Donna, sorry to be quick with everybody, but it's good to get through these. Donna, just on the LoRaWAN coexistence with Wi-Fi, Bluetooth Low Energy, Zigbee, these kind of things. How does that work? What does that coexistence look like in smart homes and buildings?
Very complementary. We work very closely with Wi-Fi. Again, it's used as a backhaul for us, and the difference is for LoRaWAN is our distance, the long distance, and so inside the home, outside of the home, all the way out to so many miles. But we do use the Wi-Fi as a backhaul, and so we work very closely with Wi-Fi and even Bluetooth. So it's very complementary in how the technologies bounce back and forth with each other.
Okay, all right, thank you. And examples of in-building deployments, LoRaWAN. Donna, can you pick that one up very quickly?
So sure, like I mentioned Costco with a water, and they are showing a 20% reduction in water waste, 22% savings in water bills. I mean, I could go on. We've got Capgemini, which is real estate services using LoRaWAN. They're doing it for offices. They're monitoring over 200 employees, 10,000 meeting rooms in 60 countries, and they're estimating a savings of 20 million euros yearly. We've got Minerzental that is doing housing and real estate as well for energy consumption. There have over 200 devices connected in 389 cities. They talk about the future proofing and how easy it is, and the open standard and the reliability and the scalability. I mean, I could go on and on. I mean, yeah.
Donna, just to shift the use case to moving sensors, if you like, tracking this kind of stuff in the logistics industry. How does LoRaWAN perform versus your equivalents?
In terms of tracking, yeah, we're very big in asset tracking, and
specifically on moving sensors. So yeah, stuff in motion.
So you're talking about roaming?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Well, so yes, so we have deployments very big, like I said, in logistics. We do have roaming between countries. They have providers have roaming agreements, and yeah, I mean we're doing it all. Like I said, we're doing it now. So yeah.
Sure. Okay. And just one for Adash, one for you here. These future forecasts around the cellular stuff. I mean, we've got a question here about the cost, the limited coverage, the power consumption, this kind of stuff, and that they don't buy it. I mean, just can you talk around that story and how the technology, I guess, is developing? I know Huawei is doing a lot with network and network advances and some of this kind of stuff. Can you talk about that and just how that market will develop, the ecosystem will develop, and how that growth those forecasts are kind of justified?
I think some of the, in terms of the power consumption, at least we've already started seeing empirical data showing that both NB-IoT and LTE-M. NB-IoT is a little bit more power efficient because of its narrow, because it's actually sending small packets of data. But both can actually support 10 plus years of battery life. What we expect to see is with some of the eSIM and iSIM based solutions, you'll see much better improvements in terms of battery efficiency in both these technologies. And that is where you'll start seeing much higher uptake of, say, NB-IoT and LTE-M in, say, smart metering, for example, in water and gas, and asset tracking, and other sensor-based devices, which are mostly battery powered. So just answering the battery question. What was the other one, James, that you wanted?
I think the battery, the cost, I think, of deployment, this kind of stuff.
I think even the cost, I think with regards to at least the hardware cost for in devices, I think you'll see significant improvements, both from NB-IoT and LTE-M going forward. I think there's also like say significant economies of scale coming from these solutions being deployed all around the world. We still haven't seen a lot of the roaming agreements for NB-IoT. LTE-M already has started taking place. We've seen the North American telcos offering roaming, at least in Europe, with LTE-M. NB-IoT will also see something of a similar trajectory, and that will also like say make it to a degree like very competitive with regards to the cost of deploying some of these solutions using NB-IoT and LTE-M.
Okay, fantastic. Look, guys, thank you. There was a query there. I think I've dismissed it in the Q&A box around LoRaWAN use cases or case studies, and I think you will find them on the website, right, Donna?
Yes, you will. We've got yes, there are numerous case studies to talk about, not just the type, but also and you can also reach out to us, but the return on investments that the customers are seeing as well.
Okay. All right. Look, I think we're going to wrap up. Look, there's a couple of things come in. John, we will be in touch. John at iTron, we will be in touch. You know, guys, I think perhaps to wrap up, I mean, I think from a Sigfox point of view, it's really fascinating how this is a technology which is positioning itself at a very low end, has made a virtue almost out of its limitations. And perhaps that was the market, you know, putting together comparison charts and you know, calling Sigfox out wrongly. But I think that is interesting, and I think that this complementary, this idea that you stand alongside others. What was missing, perhaps, RJ, from your chart, from your slide, was about how you stand via LoRaWAN. What's your position? Do you think you stand apart? Do you see yourselves going after different use cases increasingly? I think anecdotally, I spoke to Proximus last week, and they say they don't come across Sigfox very much anymore, which seemed to imply that you've kind of, to keep the boxing analogy, of perhaps gone down a weight division or stepped out of this particular ring, and you're pursuing, quite sensibly, it seems to me, some other areas. Is that a fair assessment?
Not really. I think we continue to go after smart city deployments, but you know, we have, so to speak, other areas of focus that we're looking at, primarily asset tracking and backup for broadband. We've seen tremendous success there. Also, if you look at the smart city deployments, it takes a long time to make decisions, and so that's why we're in it for the long haul. And you know, we may have missed one or two tenders that Proximus probably didn't see us, but by all means, we're still out there going aggressively, winning business all over the world.
Okay, and Donna, just to finalize, to finish up, do you see yourself, you know, working as a complementary, in fact, to what Sigfox perhaps offers and the NB-IoT guys offer? Do you feel like each technology will carve its own niche?
I think there's so much business out there, like I talked about. It is explosive. They're probably each will, but here's what I feel. I feel that you know, LoRaWAN and more than likely NB-IoT, as shown, will probably be the two top contenders at the end. But here's my only point too with NB-IoT, even though they have obviously an incredible backing. LoRaWAN is deploying and showing ROIs. And again, if you go to our website and you look at the use cases, we just had a big meeting in Berlin, you'll see ROIs from all different companies. I guess my question is this. We are deploying, we're out there, it's successful. Why would a company switch from a very successful deployment, getting ROI immediately, to NB-IoT? So that question in my head, I don't understand. So in 6 years from now, they're already happy and working and getting ROI. Why would they switch? So being this far along in deployments and rollouts is a huge advantage, and I just am unclear. I do think it'll be LoRaWAN and NB-IoT, and I do think our operators will, you know, implement and deploy both. But I don't understand. We are all over and so massive. Why would they switch? They're exceedingly happy with LoRaWAN.
I guess your point is in 6 years.
So that's my point.
Gone. Yeah. Okay. Adash, any last comments just to bring this down a little bit and you know, draw the line under it?
Not really, James. I think then it was a great discussion. think everyone put some great points ahead, and also
Right.
like some good questions coming from the webinar.
Okay.
Just one last point. If there are any other questions regarding the report or some of the data we just put out, please reach out to ABR Research on our website, and I'll reach back to you. That's it.
Sure. Okay. Look. Okay. Thank you all. Just a reminder: there is a report out there. Please go and find it. Thank you to our panelists: Adarsh Krishnan, Principal Analyst at ABI, Ajay Rane, Vice President for Global Business Development at Sigfox, and Donna Moore, Chief Executive and Chair of the LoRa Alliance. And lastly, thank you all for joining us. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, James.
Thank you, James. Bye now. Thanks, everyone.